In the early world of the Germanic tribes, names were never chosen casually. A Germanic tribe did not name itself simply to be identified, but to be understood. These names carried meaning, memory, and warning. To outsiders, they sounded like simple labels, but within that world they functioned as coded statements about power, ancestry, and the right to rule. Spoken in gatherings, carried by travelers, and remembered long after faces were forgotten, these names shaped how a tribe was approached, respected, or challenged. Why did Germanic tribes place so much importance on their names, choosing words that carried weight rather than clarity? And how did those names shape power, loyalty, and fear long before authority was enforced by law or weapons? In a world governed by memory and reputation, a name could decide how others approached you before a single action was taken. Stay with us as we uncover how Germanic tribe names worked like living codes, spoken once, remembered for generations, and powerful enough to shape loyalty, fear, and rule long before borders or written law existed. A world where names had weight. The Germanic world was largely oral. Power did not rest in documents or contracts, but in memory, reputation, and spoken recognition. In such a society, names mattered deeply. A name was not a label attached after identity formed, it was identity itself, spoken aloud. When a tribe announced its name, it was declaring how it wished to be seen and remembered. Names traveled faster than armies. Long before written records fixed history in ink, names traveled through oral memory, growing stronger with every retelling. Before people encountered a tribe face to face, they heard its name through traders, enemies, or neighboring groups. In a world where authority depended on recognition rather than law, a name could draw allies, deter rivals, or invite conflict, and through it, power took shape. To name a tribe was to define its place in the world, as the name carried meaning, expectation, and fear. Names as claims, not descriptions. Germanic tribe names were rarely neutral. They did not describe geography alone, nor were they simple references to settlements. Instead, they functioned as claims. Claims to ancestry, strength, divine favor, or historical dominance. A name could assert that a people descended from legendary ancestors. It could imply that they were chosen, hardened, or destined to rule. These were not poetic flourishes. In a world without centralized authority, belief mattered as much as force. If others believed a tribe was powerful, ancient, or protected, that belief shaped alliances and resistance long before swords were drawn. The power of ancestral language. Many Germanic tribe names pointed backward rather than forward. They referenced origin stories, mythic founders, or imagined ancient lineages. This backward gaze created authority. A tribe that claimed deep roots implied stability and legitimacy. Newer groups lacked this advantage. Ancient names suggested that a people had endured trials, wars, and migrations. Survival itself became proof of strength. By encoding ancestry into a name, Germanic tribes turned memory into power. Names as warnings to outsiders. Germanic tribe names were not used only for internal identity. They also functioned as outward-facing signals meant to be heard and interpreted by others. When a name circulated beyond the tribe, it shaped expectations before any direct contact occurred. To outsiders, a name could suggest danger, toughness, or an unwillingness to submit. Some names became associated over time with fighting ability or resistance to control. Others implied cohesion and discipline, suggesting that a group would respond collectively rather than fracture under pressure. These impressions mattered in negotiations, trade, and warfare, where reputation often guided decisions. A tribe known by a threatening or respected name could discourage attack without lifting a weapon. The name itself acted as an early form of defense, influencing behavior through anticipation rather than force. Power, in this sense, began with perception and was reinforced every time the name was remembered. Internal power and belonging. Within the tribe, a shared name defined who belonged and who did not. Membership was not only about living together, but about being recognized as part of a collective identity. Leaders gained authority by representing and protecting that identity. Their role depended on recognition from those who shared the name. Challenging leadership meant challenging the meaning attached to the group itself. Power inside the tribe was therefore relational. It existed through shared acceptance rather than imposed control. Names and sacred meaning. Some Germanic tribe names contained references connected to spiritual beliefs or symbolic ideas common in Germanic culture. These associations were meaningful even without formal religious structure. Shared sacred references strengthened group cohesion by placing identity within a larger moral or cosmic framework. Leaders benefited from this by appearing as custodians of tradition rather than merely decision makers. When authority aligns with belief, it becomes harder to question. Power was reinforced through shared meaning rather than enforcement. Flexibility of names in a fluid world. Germanic tribes were not fixed populations. Historical and archaeological evidence shows frequent migration, merging, and division among groups. Names adapted to these changes. Sometimes smaller groups joined under an established name to gain recognition. In other cases, names disappeared when they no longer served unity or survival. Identity remained flexible while still meaningful. Power depended on adaptability. Names that could survive change remained useful tools of authority. Names as political strategy. Using or maintaining a particular name was often a deliberate choice. Names influenced how others reacted before negotiations or conflict began. A name could prepare the ground before any messenger arrived. A familiar or respected name reduced uncertainty in diplomacy. It signaled how a group might behave and what could be expected during contact. This helped stabilize interactions in a world without centralized governance or fixed treaties. Groups that carried recognizable names were easier to place within existing relationships. Names functioned as early political tools. They framed relationships before actions occurred, shaping expectations and limiting surprise. Roman observers and misunderstanding. Most recorded Germanic tribe names come from Roman writers. These observers documented names accurately but often misunderstood their function within Germanic society. Romans expected stable political units, while Germanic identity was flexible and responsive to circumstance. Name changes appeared confusing rather than adaptive. This led Roman writers to interpret fluid identity as disorder or weakness instead of strategy. Modern scholarship recognizes that this flexibility was intentional. Names shifted as power, territory, and alliances shifted, allowing groups to survive changing conditions without formal institutions. Names and the right to rule. Leadership among Germanic tribes was typically based on reputation and recognition rather than fixed office. Names played a role in establishing and maintaining that legitimacy. A leader speaking in the name of the tribe represented its collective identity in dealings with others. Success strengthened authority, while failure weakened both leadership and the standing of the group. Personal reputation and tribal reputation were closely linked. Power depended on continued recognition. Authority existed only as long as it aligned with shared identity and visible competence. The loss of meaning over time. As Germanic societies became integrated into written systems, the function of names changed. Laws, borders, and administration replaced oral recognition as sources of authority. Names continued to exist, but their influence weakened. They became ethnic or historical labels rather than active tools of cohesion. Identity was increasingly defined by territory and legal status rather than shared memory. Power shifted away from memory toward institutions. Authority became less personal and more abstract. Comparison with modern naming. Modern group names usually serve identification rather than cohesion. Belonging is enforced legally rather than sustained through shared belief. Germanic tribe names once carried obligation and expectation. Sharing a name implied shared behavior and responsibility. Today, names rarely shape conduct in the same way. This difference highlights how power structures have changed, moving from recognition-based authority to system-based authority to system-based control. What the code reveals about power. Germanic tribe names show that power once relied heavily on perception and shared understanding. Authority existed because people recognized it and acted accordingly. Force could support power, but it did not create it. Identity came first, followed by cooperation and obedience. Without recognition, force alone was unstable. Names maintained power by preserving meaning across time, even as leaders and circumstances changed. Why this matters now. Studying Germanic tribe names reveals how societies function without centralized control. These groups were organized through recognition rather than written law or bureaucracy. Language carried authority where institutions did not exist. Identity provided structure in uncertain conditions. Power remained flexible, negotiated, and dependent on acceptance. Power began with a name and lasted only as long as people believed in what that name represented. Germanic tribe names were never accidental. They were carefully shaped codes that declared ancestry, strength, and the right to command loyalty. In a world without borders or written authority, these names carried power across generations. They shaped how tribes understood themselves and how others approached them, judged them, or feared them. What endured was not just a name, but a shared understanding carried through speech and memory. Long before crowns, laws, or constitutions, power existed in words that were spoken, remembered, and believed enough to hold people together. These ancient names still linger in history, even when their meanings are no longer obvious. They invite us to think differently about how authority once formed and how identity shaped power before formal systems existed. Which parts of this way of thinking still feel recognizable and which feel distant today? Leave your thoughts below and stay with us as we continue exploring how early societies organized survival, loyalty, and power under far different conditions,